Never thought I'd be here, but yet here I am. This weekend, my wife, 38F, and our daughter, 13F, went to visit her mom. I couldn't go because I couldn't get the time off work, and we decided it would just be a girls' weekend for them. I'm a firefighter in a large southern city, and I'm on a call and gearing up when our dispatcher calls in to tell me that there is some emergency. I'm not really needed on the work call, so I get my cell phone and find a bunch of texts from my kid and a couple from a number I don't have in my phone. In the course of about 11 text messages, I learned that my daughter has gone ice skating and fallen and broken her wrist. She's in the emergency room, but cannot get treatment because no one can find my wife. The number that I don't know belongs to a friend of my wife's who has gone to the emergency room to sit with my kid. She was the chaperone for the girls who had gone skating. So I call this friend, and after a lot of hemming and hawing, she admits that wifey has gone to dinner with some random guy. Well, we always leave our location shared with the family because of my job. And sure enough, I pull up an address and Google it, and it's a fucking hotel. This was 10 p.m. It's now almost 4 hours later, and she hasn't answered my texts. But she did finally call our kid. I have permission and insurance information, and she got a cast and a referral to see an orthopedist when she gets home. The friend took our daughter back to her grandmother's and texted me. She said, "I'm sorry you had to find out this way about underscore, a guy's name. Apparently it's been going on every time she's gone home that I haven't gone. Meanwhile, I've worked countless hours of overtime to pay off our house, take us a nice vacations, send our daughter to the most expensive private school in our city. I'm a fool. Update 1. So, after I found out where my wife was, I felt like I was living in some kind of nightmare. I mean, I'm a firefighter in a big city in the South, always running into dangerous situations to help others, and here I am unable to even keep my own family together. I felt pretty helpless and frustrated. The next day, after making sure my daughter was okay and back safely with her grandmother, I had to face the music and talk to my wife. I called her, and she finally picked up. I asked her straight up where she was last night and why she wasn't there for our daughter. At first, she tried to dodge the question, but I wasn't having any of it. I told her I knew she was at a hotel because our location sharing app showed me exactly where she was. After a long pause, she finally confessed. She admitted she was out with a guy's name, and that it wasn't the first time this had happened. She went on to say that she felt trapped in our marriage and that she hadn't been happy for a long time. She said some really hurtful things, like how she thought I was too busy with my job and always working overtime, and she felt like she was just living in my shadow. She even blamed me for not being around enough, which made me feel even worse because I was always working extra to give our family everything they wanted. Her words stung, and it felt like a slap in the face after everything I'd done for our family, paying off our house, sending our daughter to the best school, planning awesome vacations. It made me see that no matter what I did, it was never going to be enough for her. We argued for a while, and it was clear that things between us were broken beyond repair. We both agreed that a divorce was the only option left. It was a tough decision, especially thinking about our daughter and how this would affect her. But it seemed like the only way forward after everything that had come out. The next steps were pretty rough. I talked to a lawyer to understand how to handle everything legally. My wife moved out shortly after our big fight, and we started living separately. It was a big adjustment, especially for our daughter, who was already dealing with her broken wrist and now had to handle her parents splitting up. Despite all the pain and the mess, I knew I had to keep it together for my daughter. She needed me more than ever, and I wasn't going to let her down, no matter how tough things got with the divorce and everything else. Life threw a lot at me, but I was determined to handle it as best as I could, staying strong for my daughter and making sure she had everything she needed during this tough time. Update 2. My ex and I were 3 months into separation. I kept suggesting divorce agreements, trying to find out what she would accept other than taking her back and return to being a doormat for her. I have a good head for legal documents and understood very early that as much as I would prefer to just burn everything down and disappear legally, it was very likely that I was going to be paying alimony and that she was entitled to a fair share of everything. But in a no-fault state with no gender preferences, it did mean a fair share. That meant that legally our divorce settlement wouldn't be heavily biased in her favor. So I kept trying to work with her and try to figure out how we could divide our assets. I did this every day for months. She would object to anything that put any responsibility on her, anything that left something of value out of her hands. Anytime I asked her what terms she would be okay with, she would just derail the conversation or something else. Not long into this, I realized that I would need a paper trail, so I switched to email only. Throughout all of this, I'd also recognized that a court would order spousal support, so there wasn't any point in just cutting her off financially. I wasn't a total doormat at this point, though. I had moved my direct deposit to a solo account and kept up with her weekly cash flow, and I kept paying the bills. But my final offer during this period was the heavily unfair offer of splitting the cards one to each of us. Me taking on all the debt, including her student loans, me paying her like $2, $4,000 a month for a year, so that she could get her feet under her and she gets all of our stuff. I walk away with my car, my dog, some tools, and some clothes. Still, this is a no-go. It's not good enough for her. And so we get to the meat of the story for this malicious compliance. 3 months in, I finally get her to agree to a mediator since I'm getting nowhere. She shows up to the initial meeting the first time we've seen each other in a while. The second time since splitting, she had been staying with her sister. The mediator starts out with the rules of mediation and the agreements to sign. I sign easily. She balks, but signs that finally one of the relevant terms is that we agreed to not file any other legal paperwork. We would come to an agreement, and the mediator would file the final court papers on both of our behalf to get the divorce ordered. The mediator starts asking basic questions, and every question to either of us results in my ex launching into an irrelevant topic, attempting emotional manipulation of me or him. I just ignore her and direct my interactions to the mediator. The peak was when she literally crawled on top of the big table to stick her face in mine, to force me to see her and engage in her ranting. The mediator called it quits at that point. He reminded her of the rules that she agreed to give us homework to fill out and had us scheduled the next meeting with his clerk. 2 weeks out, 3 days later, I got served with a summons to court for a hearing over spousal supports. The summons shows the claim my ex made that all she had received from me in 3 months was $130. Oh man, that wasn't true at all. Not to mention she violated the mediator's terms. I end up on a conference call with my ex and the mediator tells her that she needs to withdraw the complaint or mediation can't continue. She adamantly insists that she knows her rights. So the mediator ends his involvement. Cut says refund checks minus time worked so far and exit stage left. I prepare for the court hearing. I print out 3 months of bank statements and highlight every transfer to her, every bill paid on her behalf, every ATM withdrawal by her card. Also, over 100 toll bills that I received from her just driving through the express lane tolls. So I get the elevated license plate female to me. Altogether, it was $13,000 and change. I thought to myself, you missed a couple of zeros in your complaint. My final stack of paper was rather thick, so I printed out an Excel spreadsheet summary to use as a cover sheet. I also looked up the spousal support rules again. Basically, you take the higher person's income and subtract the lower person's income, then the person who makes more money has to pay 40% of that difference to the other person. There's a little wiggle room, but that's it. Simple. She was currently getting up to 72% of my pay. Once you factored in her bills, this court hearing was a good thing. It wasn't as good as a mediator and having a fast resolution, but I wasn't likely to end up getting screwed here. Not to mention, I had daydreams of her finding out what lying on court documents might do. The court date rolls around. I show up to court waiting in the hall outside the family law section. She shows up, plops herself next to me, and starts going off on me again. I try to ignore her. Then, to keep from engaging, I start a written transcript of her ranting, using the back cover of my paperwork folder. Finally, she realized what I'm doing and ends the rant with, "Oh, I guess you're writing what I'm saying so you can make your friends hate me. Trust me, they need no encouragement." She huffs, sits a few seats away, and is quiet the rest of the time that we waited. The court officer finally comes to get us, and we head in. The officer starts giving the legal speeches, and then asks my ex if she has anything to add to the complaint. She launches into a roller coaster speech proclaiming all of my bad faults, how mean I was to try to divorce her, and how I obviously didn't need any of the money that I made because he's just going to live somewhere simple and cheap anyways. Yeah, her words. Once my ex is done ranting. The court officer asked me if I have anything I'd like to add. The court officers seized my stack of paper and eyeball that as she's talking, I hand over the stack of papers. Tell the officer that the summary sheet on top should help clear up the financial points in question, and just verbally start going through all the items at each one. My ex interrupts to give a reason why that item shouldn't count every single time the officer keeps asking her to stop interrupting, but to no avail. We finally finish the list. The officer is shaking her head slightly and says, "Mr. OP, this court process is to ensure that both parties are doing the right thing. So all of this," she says, gesturing to my stack of papers, "needs to stop right now. We will garnish your paychecks for the amount specified by law and send that to her instead." I know that this is a win. I knew that it was going to be, but she didn't. She sat there all smug as we got into the calculations. I know that she was thrilled at the idea of getting a court check directly. It sure would show me everything wrapped up. We got the totals, signed the papers, and I handed over a check for the first payment, and the officer got up to make copies of everything. I asked the officer if I could wait in another room while she got the copies, and she agreed while giving my ex a bit of a side-eye. I got my paperwork first, with the officer saying it might take a few minutes for her to get her paperwork, but you're free to go. I got the hint and left immediately. I got in my car and immediately called my cell carrier and canceled her phone. They asked me, does she want to set up her own plan? I can't answer that. I'm hoping a court order to remove her from my accounts. Okay, they said. Then I just worked down the remaining subscriptions that I was paying for that she used. I even had all the bills in front of me from the court documents with the account numbers and customer service numbers right there. I was done and driving home when she started blowing up my phone with incoming emails demanding to know what I was doing. Then text from her sister's phone, then calls. I just grinned and didn't answer any of them. She stopped after an hour or so and gave me a few hours of silence. Then I got an all-caps email with a screenshot of the Netflix inactive account message. Oh my god, even Netflix. I admit it, I giggled. The fallout wasn't over though. A month later, after she realized how much less money she got from me after winning her case, she filed an appeal. It was denied due to a lack of a reason. A month later, she filed a complaint that I wasn't paying her car payments. This was just an excuse to get into court. I had been paying it, and I was also pretty confident that even if I hadn't, she didn't know how to get into that loan's account. She legally could. She just never had cared to learn how. This time I had a lawyer, and we both went to courts. My ex was joining by phone. The officer paused before calling my ex and tells my lawyer, "This lady's a piece of work." The validation of that statement will always remain with me. The call goes predictably. My ex makes irrelevant rants. The officer keeps shutting her down. Finally, the court officer asks my ex for proof that I wasn't making my car payments while she's holding documents proving that I had been. My ex nearly screams. I just know that he is in so that he can hurt me. The officer replies, I am holding proof that he has paid it and is satisfying his legal obligation. This complaint is dismissed. Thank you, and hangs up on my ex. Then down in the comments, we had this story from Captain Cinders. My brother went through a breakup and made a generous offer to pay for his kids' upkeep. His ex decided that wasn't enough and insisted they take the legal route. My brother happily agreed because he had already worked out what they would assess his payment to be. Yep, they determined that he was overpaying. She tried to backtrack, but once the courts determined what he should pay, that's what he had to pay. Then came the divorce. My brother offers to give her the house free and clear as a home for his kids, plus child support, and he would walk away with the remaining cash to set up his new life again. This wasn't good enough for her, and she insists they go to the courts. We found out through a third party that she was boasting that she was going to take him to the cleaners. She wanted the house half the money in child support, and she just knew the court would rule for her. So they went to court. She even hired a lawyer to fight in her corner, who apparently looked at my brother's proposal and told the judge that he found it to be sensible and equitable. Strangely enough, the judge agreed. So the ex got the house and no cash. The story doesn't end there. As part of the settlement, they each had to declare all financial details to the court. And my brother knew that she had a secret credit card with 15,000 pounds of debt that she didn't declare. If she had declared it, then legally the debt would have been half his, but she kept it quiet. Why? Embarrassment, we assumed. So she'll get the house and no cash. But now she has this secret debt that she can't pay off. So she panics and starts saying that she wants to claim future earnings, pensions, inheritance, etc. My brother made her an offer of $15,000, but she had to sign away all future claims to his money. She snapped it up 2 years later. My brother inherits 500,000 pounds. She cannot claim a penny of it. So by assuming that my brother was trying to screw her, she screwed herself every step of the way.